I don't know, Charles. I hope we're not about to feel deja vu all over again. People have been saying there's a possibility of a ground invasion in Iran. How are you doing?
Well, so far so good out here, and it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. But
Nice hat. That's a new hat.
yeah, I had to get. There was a last week. There was an event where you had to wear all white, and all I had were blue hats. So I
Not a
kind of
ditty
went.
party, I hope.
No, no, not at all. Not in the slightest.
Now, Charles, before we get into the details of what's going on in Iran, which I think a lot of people are troubled by, we've got a rare, today was a day, we don't have this too often, where we had one idea and then it got swapped out almost like an audible. We're going to talk about this later. Also, the whole concept of Zoran Mamdani being the Shah of a sovereign city state, according to him. But we got to talk about Iran. I have a question for you, actually,
Sure.
because we've heard from Doug McGregor and Larry Johnson and guys like that. That I mean, since February, we've heard that Iran has destroyed all U.S. bases in the Middle East, and we've already lost this war. But yesterday was the first time we saw any video of actual like soldiers uploading video, and now we've got casualties and retaliation. How do we know what's true? Did they destroy all the bases, or did this just happen yesterday? What's going on?
Yeah, I saw another report that enough of the barracks on these, places where people live in these bases have been destroyed that now, allegedly, and I don't know how true this is, and I don't know where the reporting is coming from, allegedly, our forces are being housed in hotels. Um, and, you know, I, I think there is that phrase, what truth is the first casualty of war.
Right.
And, uh, um, you know, it, I think we've gotten in trouble in the past in this country when our populations have been lied to about what's going on with regard to wars. And we just got in Vietnam, for example, deeper and deeper into that mess, and did not exactly cover ourselves in glory on the way out the door and afterwards. So, either I've had one friend tell me that, and this is a person who knows Iran well, that the Iranian population, on balance, is not uh, pro-American at all, and remembers the Mossadegh incident and other incidents, remembers our support for the Shah and the brutalities under that regime. So, either this is a situation where harkening back to Iraq with that idiot Dick Cheney saying, that the people of Iraq will welcome the United States with open arms after Saddam Hussein, and now, tens of billions of dollars, maybe more later, we're persona non grata in Iraq. So, uh, I it doesn't at this moment. Things do not look very good to me. If it is the case, I mean, taking a big step back, it, if it is the case, as Trump and Hegseth allege, that the Iranian Navy is destroyed and the Air Force is destroyed and the munitions manufacturing capacity has been degraded to the tune of 85%, how the hell are the Iranians successfully bombing Jordan and Syria and Iraq and Bahrain? There's a disconnect here. Something's wrong in this calculus. So um, we can't exactly at this stage, I don't think, just say, what, we fucked up, we're out of there. So, what do we really need to win this war, and what does winning mean?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, the MOU was straight up stupid,
Yeah.
because it's very clear to me that the Islamic regime, and mind you, this is not an Arab country, Iran. This is a Caucasian country, and the Islamic religion is not, the natural religion in Iran. So the malocracy and this military, IRGC, to me, have to be defeated. The only thing that we should be negotiating is the terms of their surrender. and then there would need to be national elections, and we would have to respect the will of the people in that election. And that sounds to me like nation building. It sounds to
Yeah,
me like something that Trump did not say he would do.
right. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So people have been circulating on social media this map that they say is regional tactical analysis, that this is like, some big ground invasion plan, which again sounds to me like a disaster. I don't really know. You know, and then, even Joe Kent, who I spoke to early this week, was on social media saying, okay, now we have to strike Iran hard and then get out of there. So it's like even people who were staunchly against this war, this is how these things kind of you get in there.
Yeah, well, you have don't forget the problem with the Houthis in Yemen, and don't forget uh, the impact of all of this on China. China is getting its oil from Iran, and with the strait now cut off, China's not just sit back and say, "Oh, that's fine." So this is very troubling. And actually, what is also troubling is the situation in Europe, first vis-a-vis Ukraine and Russia. The obvious fact, we've been on it since day one, and you have personal knowledge. I have been to Ukraine, and I forget how many times now, but many times. It's a corrupt country. Corruption is endemic in Ukraine, and the notion that the West would send $350 billion into a corrupt hellhole and not expect his goodly portion of it to have been stolen is beyond pathetically stupid. So, there are open, widespread reports now of lots of corruption. Of course, Zelensky and the Ukrainians want more money. And thankfully, people, for example, the AfD in Germany and others across Europe are saying, now, wait a minute, why does this thug need more money? And by the way, why are we supporting him? Beyond that, the president of Hungary was removed by the EU.
Yeah, that was
You know,
crazy. What's that about?
well, it's a contest. I mean, the EU is, in essence, it was a bad idea, a very bad idea. It was one of Europe's very bad political ideas. Um, and it is driving, its goal is to basically eliminate the power of the nation states and concentrate it in an unelected and unaccountable bureaucracy where, the leader of the EU's husband is a grifter, and there are countless other grifters in that whole apparatus. So the situation in Europe is looking very bad. The situation in blue states and wokeism in the U.S. Blue states um, are brought to you. The policies of blue states are the failed policies of Europe. Open borders. I was shocked to see the number of people on welfare in New York City. How high it's gigantic percentage. So you say to the world, the poor across the world, come to New York City. We're not going to prosecute crime. We welcome criminals. Um, you could do whatever you want and have a subsidized lifestyle. And, if you really push it, you can have, you get welfare from multiple different.
Is this 10% of people on welfare?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Right. And then we were talking offline briefly about this moron who speaks fluent moron, this Claudio, whatever his last name is, who's a
Claudio
spokesperson.
thinking.
Yeah, a spokesman for connected to the Democratic Socialists of America. The guy's a moron, a full-on moron. But he up talks, he's got a man bun, he's, telegenic maybe. Um, and he's just lying his ass off. He doesn't understand economics. I mean, New York City today, I would argue, is uninvestable. You said he's the Shah of New York. He's the Shah of a shithole, of a shithole. I mean, today only a moron would buy the debt of New York City. Only a freaking moron. And the fact that New York City and New York State are, I think, already in an economic catastrophe, is an opportunity for the people who are backing the DSA to short the debt and make money off the collapse of New York City and New York State.
Well, and let's just for a minute talk about this because I recognize there's a lot of viewers who don't like Netanyahu or Israel, and that's fine. People can feel that way. But irrespective of how you feel about that, Zoran Mamdani is not here to enforce international law. The ICC, frankly, should be kicked out of New York along with the UN. But to the extent that the UN remains here, there's a treaty that specifically says you cannot arrest delegates from foreign countries when they come to New York to go to the UN, at least not if all they're doing is going to the UN. I suppose if they murder somebody or something like that, perhaps you could. But it's got to be in New York. You can't arrest them for violations of international law. He's not here to enforce the decrees of The Hague or the ICC. And by the way, he's giving this interview as the city is absolutely flooding out. The subways don't work. 10% of everybody is on welfare. The cops are corrupt. Crime is exploding. The infrastructure is collapsing. This guy is, see, he's dangerous, Charles, but it's because he's incompetent. He's dangerous in the way a 4-year-old driving you to the airport is dangerous. He just has no idea what he's doing, in my opinion.
Well, the other thing to discuss in this regard is I believe there are laws on the books that prohibit avowed communists from becoming citizens of the country. And so how did this guy become a citizen? Did he lie on his naturalization papers? The DSA are fond in public of saying they're socialists, but in private, many of them admit they're communists. They're just espousing socialism until they get control, and then they're going to practice communism. This guy is really that he and others in the DSA are disgraceful.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely disgraceful. And the notion that you get elected, I mean, he's a mayor, right? It's a big city, but there are many, many cities in the country. We can't have we will have anarchy if you have, every mayor can decide, what laws to follow in his or her city. And then every judge, we'll talk about when confirmation to a lifetime appointment, we'll talk about adherence to the law. And I'm not partisan, although I vote Democrat. I look at the facts and judge it. And then they turn out to just be naked partisans. I mean, we are close to anarchy. And Obama and Hillary and others like to talk about being clear-eyed. If you're a clear-eyed investor and you're looking at putting money that you have outside the United States into the United States of America, and you start hearing, the Claudio, the moron from Chile, talking about, 12% is too high a rate of return for rental property in New York City. Who is this moron to decide, or some politician to decide what is a fair rate of return? There's a thing called the market, and if you look at if you look carefully at the process of trying to rent an apartment and how to maintain it and the taxes you pay and all the different regulations you have to follow and the paperwork. I mean, it's the cost of housing is high in New York City because of the government.
Right. I think it's also quite easy to lose money as a landlord if properties
Yeah.
go unrented or there's somebody who doesn't pay and you got to go to court. It's
Right.
I don't know why people think it's just like a money printing machine. There's a lot of people, you've heard stories where they are individual property owners who get screwed. I mean, I guess it's one thing if you're a real estate billionaire and you have thousands of apartments that you own or whatever, but plenty of stories about families that own units in Brooklyn or Queens or whatever, and some schmuck like this moves in and doesn't pay the rent. I mean, look at
Right.
this guy.
Yeah,
You have to
and
listen to this moron for a second, Charles.
sure.
Of capitalism and American imperialism, in many cases, is actually what brings immigrants to the U.S. coming out of Latin America. And
So they come here because they don't like the imposition of American imperialism in the country that they're in?
yes, in many
They
countries,
come here.
in many countries,
That
you
doesn't
know,
make much sense.
there have been Democrats.
This
ridiculous.
guy.
No, this is what happens when you have, you know, DEI policies in classrooms,
Yeah.
right? Morons deserve a voice. I mean, that's an absolute at Horace Mann, which was not DEI when I was there. You try that bullshit in class, and the teacher would ridicule you. I mean, it would encourage the class to make fun of you. That is preposterous bullshit,
It's not
right?
ridicule anymore, Charles.
Right? No, no, you need the old-fashioned dunce cap, right? In the early days of school, I never had to wear a dunce cap, but the kids were made to put on a dunce cap.
It's good
You
for
know?
the self-esteem, I think.
Well, but this is idiotic,
Well,
right?
the pendulum has swung too far in the opposite direction, I think.
For a guy on Fox News, right? Martha McCallum was too nice to him to say that the reason people fled Central and South America to come to America, which has full-throated capitalism back then, was because these countries adopted capitalism. You know, you don't have to leave, right? You're coming to America because it's more capitalist, because you don't like capitalism. It's ridiculous.
But that guy doesn't sound like he was like, scrounging for food in Cuba last year. He sounds like he went to, Friends Academy and grew up in Westchester or something like that.
Right? Exactly. A complete moron.
Yeah.
And when you do talk to people, as I have in the course of my life, talk to people who fled socialism or fled communism,
They love it here.
these people are economically hard right people. And not advocates of democratic socialism. You notice he was up talking with a man
He's
bun.
Gustavo Gordillo is who that guy is.
Oh, Claudio, Gustavo,
Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. No, the guy's a moron. Another AOC, another moron.
Where did they find this guy?
And I think they cast them. I think they go through and they have casting. AOC talked about it. I mean, she was one of 10 or 20,000 people interviewed for the job, and they select somebody who can talk on TV.
This guy is now Zoran's transition team. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. The city is just being run by morons.
Right. Well, I mean, it's not going to get better. Right. I mean, what they do is they, now that Zoran has the ability to put his friends on the payroll, is they insert all kinds of people like this Gustavo guy into the apparatus, so that if Zoran has to leave or doesn't win re-election or decides to do something else, these people are stuck into the machinery now. And they're going to make bad decisions. I mean, he's acting as if the rent freeze was a good idea.
Look at
biggest
this.
problem
He's got the ear pods in his ear, so he's so oppressed. He's got Bluetooth headphones. When you wear those, Charles, these wireless Apple headphones, there is literally an electronic beam that shoots from one to the other through your brain. I do not use these. I don't like this invention. But this guy has an electron beam shooting through his brain, and it's having a really easy time getting from one side to the other.
Yeah, I was going to say his brain cavity, but yeah, I mean, these people should be as very far away from having any influence over the quote market. I mean, I've told this story before to you privately, but when I used to stop at McDonald's in the 20s on 6th Avenue, there were a collection of 3 knuckleheads who had each, I think, been in prison. And these are 3 white guys who found themselves working in maintenance in those slums, the city-owned slums a few blocks away from you.
Yeah.
And they would exchange stories in very loud voices about the various scams they were pulling, on, who gets the apartment maintained next. There's a waiting list for any repair. Everything takes longer than it should. They're the guys who have to go out, and if you need materials, they buy it, and they buy and they say, they spent $500 when they really spent $200. So they get, it's just nonstop scam. And the collective IQ of these three morons is probably 60. And that's what you have. And you walk by those slums, right? You could just tell they're dangerous, right?
Oh, yeah.
And this is an example of what happens when you allow capital, that's those sites. If you raised those slums and, paid whatever you had to pay to the people who were living there, you could probably put up, structures that are worth 20 times, maybe 50 times the value of what's there. But
I think they
meanwhile, the
get
city,
built because they make deals with developers. Like when they made Hudson Yards, there's a whole part of it that they're still working on building that's low income housing. But how does it make sense to have they have like the Rolex store and the omakase sushi restaurant and then subsidized housing? Why do that?
it doesn't make any, well, you need people to clean the apartments. I mean, you need people to do low skill jobs in theory. And this is
Right
before you
in
think through,
there.
well, this is before you think through or try to think through the impact of AI and what it's going to do here. I already, I'll give you a sense of, I got put on a subcommittee of the country club, and we are already taking jobs. I don't want to do this, but we're already taking jobs out of a country club, a tennis club in the center of Penang here. And our new security system, instead of having, like a credit card to come in and access the club, you just look at, put your
Facial
face,
recognition.
and you get in. Soon we're going to have that for ordering.
Wow.
And that's resulted in taking out, I don't know, 25% of the staff.
Wow.
This is in a country club in Penang.
Speaking of the impact of AI, Charles, they've already got robot AFC, so maybe we could use these guys to clear out the low-income housing, fighting and kicking each other's heads off.
Yeah, exactly. There was some fight where the head of the thing went off and it kept on fighting.
Yeah, I think it's about to happen right here.
That's what Gustavo, his head,
his head popped off and he kept talking.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reminded of, back in the early 80s, a transportation company hired McKinsey and, was giving a report to the owner, the CEO and the management team. And I was in the room and, I was listening to the head of the transportation practice at McKinsey, just spout garbage that made no sense, saying in a transportation company, most of the costs are variable. We're talking about air, ground package transportation and air arrival to FedEx. And that's just not true. You sign long-term leases for planes and proper warehouses and all this kind of stuff. I'm sitting there shaking my head in this meeting. I was maybe 26, 27. And the president kind of, Charles is shaking his head. I suppose we have to listen to what he has to say now. And the CEO of the company was also the chairman of Dillon Reed, took one look at the guy and said, leave the room. And while you're at it, the CEO, leave the room, and McKinsey, leave the room. only Dillon Reed people are going to talk about this now. So Nick turned to me and he said, why are you shaking your head, Charles? And I said, because this is, total garbage what the guy's saying. I gave my reasoning. And Nick thought about it for a second and he said, give me a second. And he walked out of the room, fired McKinsey. His brother-in-law was the head of McKinsey.
Whoa.
Fired McKinsey on the spot.
Happy Thanksgiving.
And fired the two guys.
Not surprising, Charles. But what we're going to do now is make our way over to the First Amendment Forum, where we'll continue to talk about this and many other topics. I hope people will join us. You can sponsor Crowdsource the Truth and enjoy the sponsor-exclusive content, including this episode in the First Amendment Forum coming up right now. Go to crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com or subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. I mistakenly thought a new function on X was allowing me to give subscribers on X live sponsor exclusive videos. I don't know why they can land rockets on a stick, but they can't get the sponsor exclusive videos going. So that will be up right after the show is done. Thanks to everybody who subscribes on X at J.